what would you say is the big red flag?
The first person that showed interest in him, he just took the opportunity. The defensiveness he had about the phone. There are pros and cons to non-monogamy and monogamy.
If somebody is listening to this and has found out that their partner has been cheating, what advice would you give them?
I think if they're a bit cagey about their phone.
Kate, you're very welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I love your tattoos.
Thank you.
Can we talk about them for a second?
You can if you
Just
want.
for a second.
Yeah.
We have Medusa on our right arm.
Oh, ever present.
Okay. Oh, wow. You have some epic tattoos. Why Medusa?
I did an essay on her, and it's extremely random. So apologies for the segue.
Go on.
I was going to drop out of my course in Trinity. I was thinking about it at the time, and then I wasn't doing too good mentally, and then I wrote an essay that sort of like pulled me back from the abyss of academic turmoil, you might say. And then I was like, okay, I'm actually not that bad at this. And it was about it's a very dense topic, but it was sort of about like hair, the study of women's hair in kind of literature and history. So a lot of it was about Medusa and kind of the myths around her. And at the time, there was some turbulence in my own life that I sort of related to her story. And I like how her story has been rewritten throughout classical history. And when you actually find out more about the real story, it kind of changes your perception of her. So I kind of enjoyed that. Okay. But it was one of my first tattoos, and it was very large. So my mother was exceptionally angry at me.
And looks very painful. Was it painful?
It was not painful at all.
It was not painful.
I have 10 tattoos. Only one was painful. It was on my ribs, and it was only 10 minutes long. That was rough. None of the other ones hurt at all. But
it's nice to have a tattoo that means so much, isn't it? Because it reminds you of a time and a place. And I'm really sorry to take you back to a time and a place that probably is a little painful to discuss. But I think it's a really important topic. We're going to talk about infidelity and cheating in relationships. I do think it is more common than we think. And you had written an article about it. You're a journalist and you've spoken to a lot of people about it. Do you think it's more common than people think?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I think in Ireland, especially, there's a huge culture of shame around things like that and self-blame. But I also think, I don't think Irish people are that good at talking about our intimate relationships, be that our sex lives, our dating lives, intimacy. I think it's sort of, I think there's a worry about personal failure there. You know what I mean? Even figuring out who to speak to if there's something happening in your relationship that you're not happy about. If there's a problem, I don't think we really have the tools of communication with certain partners that we have, and also in our wider lives. I'm lucky that now I know who to speak to if there's something going on in my relationship. Obviously my partner as well, but if there's something that I want advice about, I know who to go to. But a lot of people I don't think are that lucky, and I think there's this feeling that if you have to go to someone for advice, that, you know, there's something wrong there. And we also live in the age of like dump him culture, you know what I mean? Where there's a lack of nuance, I think, with these situations. And it's I think there's a fear with younger people who I spoke to that if and I'm talking about a heterosexual relationship here,
sure,
that if you're talking about your boyfriend doing something that maybe has bothered you, mild or not, or it's an issue that's ongoing in your relationship, that there is this whole dump him culture.
Yeah.
And I see where it comes from. It's understandable. I don't know if you read the Vogue article that went viral recently about how having a boyfriend is embarrassing.
Yes.
It's really interesting. People really misinterpret it as well.
It's kind of scary. I mean, we had a conversation with some daters, and expectations are high, and we do live in a culture, a dump 'em culture, and also everything is so disposable, you know. And I think I think my marriage has survived 18 years together, 11 years married, is because we're both willing to put up with each other, and we tend to we're trying to work towards it. We are definitely not perfect. And I want to get into that in a little bit. Now, you've had two vastly different experiences of cheating. Can you tell me a bit about that?
I can, yes. The first one was way back when I was 21. So almost 10 years ago now to the day. It was my first serious relationship. And I think that's probably why it had such an impact on me, because when you go into a relationship and you're very new to it and you don't really understand anything about how to be a partner or what your expectations are, your standards probably aren't what they should be. you don't really have your own identity yet formed, I think you're very vulnerable to being kind of manipulated or just having an unhealthy relationship. But at the same time, you know, young people, you have to experiment, you have to see what you like.
And you're figuring out what love is.
Yeah.
You know, is this love?
Exactly.
Is this infatuation? And that I really do feel comes with experience, right?
Oh, only with experience, yeah. And with a lot of work on yourself as well. You can't just, which I'm sure I did as well, but you like learn about yourself and what you want by just trying different things. Like, you know, you're in a shop trying on different tops. That's not how it works. You know, you have to try, see what you like, and then but then you have to figure out things by yourself and what you want and how to have validation internally rather than seeking things elsewhere and learning lessons from people. This one was like a very large life lesson for me. And I didn't really talk about it for a while after it happened because I was just I was absolutely just mortified by all of it and just the impact that it had on my friends and family. I just thought it was completely my fault and that the whole situation just really triggered this series of events in my life that was it kind of never went back to being the same. There was sort of a before this relationship and an after this relationship.
I do feel a lot of people have those relationships and a rite of passage is the wrong term. But I do think they're very important, as bad and as painful as they were back then. I know I was in a relationship that was quite an abusive relationship, and I talk about it now because I want people to know who maybe younger girls or men who are in a relationship like that, you know, there is life after that and you will be okay. And not every guy is an asshole, you know, there's some good ones out there. Do you remember the moment you found out he was cheating?
It was sort of a continuous, you know...
slippery slope.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that the two relationships that involved infidelity like could not have been more different. This one, I was in college, didn't know what I was doing in college at all, didn't really understand the culture. It was my first time just like going out, you know, to clubs. As well, I think it's important to have context as well about, you know, for especially for younger listeners in Ireland who maybe post-COVID had never been to a club before and been out, and like there was definitely the culture of sexual harassment was rampant. I mean, not saying that it's like cleared now, it's not, but I have noticed a difference as someone that still goes clubbing and enjoys nightlife. And when I was in college, it was just, there was a lot of things that were accepted then that wouldn't be now. And I think when you're trying to figure out your self-worth and trying to date and, you know, start exploring things sexually as well, it's difficult to do that when you're surrounded by all this kind of toxicity. But I met this person at quite a turbulent time anyway, and was really looking, I really wanted to start dating. I'd never really dated before. Went to like an all-girls secondary school, which I absolutely hated, you know, didn't really know anything. Was
didn't know how to talk to a boy. I was pretty much the same.
I had loads of male friends, but I just
good on
like
you.
loads of, and I had really like excellent male friends in my life to this day. But I didn't have experience of falling in love or dating anybody. And I think I had like put it off for a while and then was really swept up in this person then and felt that this was the way it was supposed to be. You know, really dramatic, wild gestures from the very beginning of, you know, declarations of love. This like intensity that I thought was kind of normal, you know, which later on I realized was absolutely not normal. But when you're a bit clueless and vulnerable, you just don't really understand those things. And I did have a kind of gut feeling from the beginning that something wasn't quite right. But I think you want to ignore those things when you just want things to work out. You know what I mean? You just kind of put it in a box and ignore it. So we had been dating for a few months, and then I went to work in the States for a couple of months. And I didn't think that we were going to be exclusive for those few months because we hadn't been dating crazy long.
Okay.
You know? So I was trying to be mature about it and say, you know, the expectations here, I'm going to be living in a frat house for 4 months. Not that I wanted to explore that, but I just acknowledged that the situation, it's 4 months without seeing this person. We're in college, we're that age. I wasn't really expecting it. And he was the one that insisted, like, no, I think we should be labeled and I think we should really give this a go and be like, you know, exclusive. And I said, okay. He was like really, really intense about it. And then the entire 4 months that I was there, he changed. The second I got on the plane, like he completely changed and started acting really sort of paranoid and started kind of saying really insulting things out of the blue and like would fly into a temper. But I think because I was so far away and it was sort of over Zoom calls or texts, I sort of pretended that that's not him. This is just who he is while I'm not there. And then I had suspicions while I was there that he wasn't being honest about who he was getting with, or the fact that he wasn't getting with anybody, and he assumed that I was living in a frat house, which wasn't true. And then when I got back, it was a very different relationship, and it very much escalated into something that was really unhealthy, really toxic. He became the person that he was online digitally over those few months. He kind of became that then in person.
Okay.
It was kind of like a mask had come off or something. But the entire time, from when I was back in Dublin and was around him, I just knew that there was things going on. He was really...
Like that sixth sense, isn't it? It's crazy.
People know. You always know. It's like it's your gut.
It's your gut. It is. If your gut is telling you something is off.
Yeah.
Normally something's
weird.
Something is off.
I could tell by his social media, by how weird he was about his phone. He was really, really cagey.
That's a big telltale sign.
Yeah.
Weird about the phone.
Of course, I would never do that. But I remember there was one time when I was staying at his apartment and he was like really furiously texting somebody, like really intensely. And it was kind of, he was turned away from me so that I couldn't see. And then he had gone really quiet for a while and I was kind of like confused about his moods would change really, really quickly. So you had to really tread carefully around if there was a strange atmosphere. And I just kind of was like joking, tapping on the shoulder, being like, oh, what's going on? The defensiveness he had about the phone, I sort of forgot to think about, well, what was on this phone that I didn't want to see. And it sort of like literally jarred me into being like, okay, I need to assess
is that
what I'm doing
when you
right
knew
now.
It's time to get out?
Yeah, there was that. There was a few, I think it was only a 2-week period when I got back from the States. And it didn't take long it was actually my mum said to me, like, you are going to lose your friends and family one by one if you continue to stay in this type of situation. Because people can't watch that, you know what I mean? They can't see you jeopardize things, lie to your family about where you're going. You don't want to date somebody who you have to lie about, going to see. So, and then after I had kind of explained that this was not a suitable situation anymore, and he had turns out been already dating somebody else. And then that turned into like an absolute crazy situation. And we ended up contacting each other, the next person. And then there was like this trail of people because it was sort of like this strange chain of warnings.
You did write that silence is a big factor in cheating. What do you mean by that? On your part, like on the person who's been cheated on, the silence and the shame of not telling friends and family exactly what's happening?
I think for that relationship, it was a bit complicated because I was silent on a lot of elements of it. Like I was silent on abusive elements of it because I also, at the time, would never have referred to it as that because I didn't understand it. And I was still in a place where I blamed myself for everything. Was very much like, oh, my bad taste in men, this sort of thing. I've put myself in dangerous situations, my responsibility. And it wasn't until I went to counselling 3 years later, like it took ages to open the can of worms, that she sort of changed my perspective on it and allowed me to sort of address what it really was. And that was very healing, but also damaging because it was a lot to accept then, you know what I mean? And I was still very young. I think when I went to counselling then I would have been like 24. Still had not really had successful, healthy relationships yet at all.
Is that why you felt a need to go to counselling because you...
No, I actually it was a pain counsellor. I started having a lot of health issues actually after the first relationship. My endometriosis started flaring. I think it was genuinely like the stress of being in such a situation where your body is in like fight or flight mode all the time. Got diagnosed with fibromyalgia. Your body reacts, the body keeps a score.
Yeah.
It's very true. Like your body does react to these situations. So I went to her for pain counselling. She happened to also be trained in relationships counselling, and pain counsellors, they want to go to the source. When did this pain start? But then obviously you're defensive because you don't want to feel like, oh, they're trying to tell me the pain's in my head, because it's not. But they just want to know, because a lot of the time a lot of pain is rooted in trauma.
What was it like to unpack that finally years later? Did you feel a sense of relief? It must have been quite traumatic again to say the words, of what you went through. That must have been a really difficult thing to do.
It was. I wouldn't even say the words, you know what I mean? Like my counselor would say the words and she'd be like, you can say them. And I was like, no, I don't. Because I think when you blame yourself that much, or you think, oh, well, they cheated on me because I did something wrong and made them angry. You deserve this happening to you. This was an inevitable thing. If I had just done X, Y, Z, they wouldn't have done this. So it was really hard. But also I was in a relationship, a different relationship 3 years later with someone who was very sweet and very kind. But going to counselling and opening that other kind of worms and realising all of these things, it actually was negative on my personal life because it sort of, then I sort of almost couldn't stop talking about it and it really destabilized where I was at the time because you'd been sort of repressing it and then it all comes up. Like trauma follows you everywhere. You can't escape it for that long. And it sort of not torpedoed that relationship, but I needed to be on my own and to reflect and deal with everything myself and not look for an escape in another person. But that was not good to realise. But it had to happen to get to where you are later. And then almost 10 years later was my second experience of infidelity, which was wildly different. Like
you said also it was a bit of a wake up call.
It was a total wake up call about that relationship, which I had also like deliberately put the blinkers on in terms of, like, I knew that we weren't compatible. I think a lot of infidelity can come around incompatibility and insecurity, and I had a lot of deep feelings for this person, and they were actually a really, really sweet partner, but he did not have the tools to deal with his insecurity and his own issues, and had never been a partner before, didn't really understand a lot of basic things about being in a relationship at our age, in a serious relationship. Was very insecure, wanted to spend all of his time with me, felt that even if I had other hobbies or other friends, that it was almost like he was being abandoned. So I did spot quite clearly, like, this is a lovely person and I'm having a really nice time, but am I going to be with this person in 5 years? No, I doubt it. So I've been having doubts, and I think he had perceived these doubts and had really turned them inward and was feeling really, really insecure about them, but did not have the tools to come to me and say, I sense your doubts and I sense you've like having itchy feet or feeling the need to go and be by yourself, and there's nothing I can do to stop that, and this is my way of self-destructing the relationship. Which, it was so different in that that source of infidelity was very much New Year's Eve. He'd had a rake of pints. We weren't spending New Year's Eve together. I later found out that this really bothered him and he was really upset about it. But it was just a case of, like, we had booked tickets to different things. We were going to meet up later. I was supposed to see him later in the night. Forgot some of my pain medication at home. Ended up having to go home. And I texted him to say, I'll just crash here and I'll meet you in the morning because you're still out. Like, it was all these weird factors where I was supposed to be there and wasn't. Like, it was really bizarre. And he'd always been extremely dedicated, like very loyal, had no social media, would never have been texting somebody else, never shown interest in anyone else. And it really taught me as well that infidelity it's first of all, it is nothing to do with you. I don't really think it's to do with you. It's all to do with that person. But it's also a lot of the time not necessarily to do with physical needs at all. We had a really healthy, intimate life. It was one of the best elements of our relationship. It wasn't boredom. It wasn't that. It was just he was genuinely feeling really deeply sad and insecure that I probably wasn't going to stay there. And he would rather have, like, thrown a self-sabotage, torpedo into the situation than wait for me to make up my mind and end things with him. He just couldn't handle the waiting. So the first person that showed interest in him when he'd had that much to drink, he just took the opportunity, and then he immediately told me. I knew the second I woke up the next day as well that something was wrong. I just had this, like, really bizarre feeling because I woke up at 6 a.m, which I wouldn't normally do, and immediately checked my phone. I just had this, like, strange feeling, and there was like a rake of text saying, I've done something so terrible. I need to talk to you. I'm so sorry. Opposite of the first person who had no remorse, constantly denied it. I had to,
blaming
me, like, I wouldn't have had to do this if you weren't like this. All these it was so different. I never got an apology for the first relationship. Never got any validation in the fact that I was right. Just would never admit to anything. It was like gaslight. It was obviously, I don't even know if the term gaslight was, like, a thing at that point. But now looking back, it was very much like
exactly
your classic textbook love bombing, gaslighting. Whereas this person was very honest to a T, felt extreme remorse, was really upset. And I genuinely think he wanted me to be livid at him and like, you know, do the usual like throw a vase across the room. And I just didn't do that at all. I just went and got my stuff and didn't say anything to him and just left. Because there isn't really anything to say. I don't care what the reasons are. Like 10 years ago, I obsessed over them for ages. Like, what did I do? What happened?
Okay.
I don't care now. You know what I mean? I'm not going to...
It's not about you.
It's not about me. We weren't going to end up together. I think I already knew the reason, and that he hated the waiting game of me realising our incompatibility. His insecurity about maybe feeling that it was an imbalanced relationship in that way. He had his own abandonment issues. He had his own things from childhood that he had not addressed, which I had frequently tried to get him to address because I knew they were a problem. But you can't fix somebody, you can't help them. Everyone has their own responsibilities, including me. You know, I learned a lot from the relationship. I think he gave me an out that I was struggling to find because I did care about him. But I genuinely think he wanted me to be really angry and like really tell him what a terrible person he was, because that is what he thought about himself. And they don't know what to do if you don't give them that. So all that's left to do then is...
Must have felt very differently the second time.
Oh, like the first time I was like inconsolable and couldn't believe that this person who had been so seemingly like obsessed with me in obviously a very unhealthy way was so willing to throw things aside so quickly. I was so confused. And also because you genuinely started to feel insane, you know, when you're going down that trail of, well, he said he was here, but I know that he wasn't there at that time. And obviously being a journalist, you know, you're good at your research.
I'll find out what's happening.
It's terrible, but like you're a curious person or you're observant, you notice things really quickly. It sounded bizarre and my friends were like, you're insane. But I found it I was really happy with the fact that the second person didn't give me any of those periods of torturing yourself and figuring out in your head. But like, I swear he said this and he's telling me I'm crazy, but like, I know I'm not crazy. He never did that. He just was like, I did this thing. I'm sorry. It's terrible. I know you won't forgive me. Like, there was no lying at all. He never tried to cover it up. He told me straight away, obviously bars on the floor, bare minimum, but he knew I wasn't going to stay in that relationship. I'm not saying that there are relationships that involve cheating that can't be mended and that you can't stay with that person, but I knew that I wouldn't.
You were done.
Yeah.
How do you think someone can move from heartbreak to healing without becoming, I suppose, very cynical about love?
Oh, it's probably a bit like the 7 stages of grief, isn't it? Where it's like you'll be angry for a long time. I believe that anger is a really necessary emotion and really useful emotion a lot of the time. You'll probably start acting a little weird on nights out. I think you have to be careful with self-medicating, like alcohol.
And who you surround yourself with.
With. I think for me, when I used to be on the dating apps, I always knew when I needed a break, when I start to get very cynical about the apps and men in general. Because obviously you have really bad experiences on dating apps with men. They send you really weird comments.
And pictures.
And pictures, also just the pictures. But then you can't think that this microcosm is an image of real life. I think it's important to go out and nurture your relationships with people in real life. I was also quite lucky that, like, because I have such lovely male friends that I think I'm very aware that there are amazing men out there who are capable of being amazing partners. Also, women cheat too. You know, non-binary people, they, thems. Everybody is capable of cheating, I think. And a lot of it is just about insecurities, about impulse control, addiction. I've read studies that show that people with addiction are maybe slightly more likely. Alcohol definitely plays a role in a lot of the people that I interviewed, where the person that they were with, a few too many drinks, lost impulse control, acted on certain desires, where there was a void, there was something missing in a relationship, and all it took was one person to highlight the one thing that was missing in them or boost their confidence in the smallest of ways. And
what do you think of that old saying, once a cheater, always a cheater?
That's a hard one. I've had to think a lot about that because personally, I'm not sure if I could seriously date somebody who has a history of infidelity. I don't know if I could do that, but I think that's just because of my personal history. I just don't know it took so much to build up being able to trust again. I still have to work on it in my current relationship sometimes. There are wounds that get pressed, as my old counsellor used to say, like a bruise that gets poked. And then I start behaving in a way that I don't like, you know what I mean? And start getting too much in my head about it. So I just think I wouldn't be able. I do think I like to think people are capable of change. I think it depends on the situation as well. Every cheating scenario that I've heard from interviewing people is very different. I think whether they show remorse is really important. Sometimes I think also the time in their life, like were they going through something? Were they in college and just a bit of a mess? Were they dealing with, drinking too much, chasing highs, dopamine highs? Has their life changed a lot now? Are they a different person? Like some of my friends have been in situations like this where they've acted in a way that is not them. And like 10 years later, they're an incredible partner to somebody.
Yeah.
So you never know. Like I've interviewed somebody who was going through severe, struggles with their personal life and their way of dealing with relationships. And then they changed how they approach relationships later on. They question monogamy. They're, and obviously I think there are links with non-monogamy and cheating, even though like there are pros and cons to non-monogamy and monogamy. You know what I mean? It's not black and white at all. I know people in non-monogamous relationships where there are rules, you know what I mean? Everyone has drawn up their own lines in a relationship. There can be infidelity in monogamous and non-monogamous relationships. Everybody has their rules and you have to communicate them to your partner.
So I suppose the most important thing is whether you're in an open relationship and you're not, or whatever it is. I think one thing I'm getting from this conversation is we really need to learn what our boundaries are.
Yeah.
And what we like, right? Mm-hmm. What do we want from this relationship? What do I want? And that's a question that we don't really learn to ask ourselves. So sometimes it's very late, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's why we all go through those relationships. But what do I want? What are my boundaries? So what have you learned over these last few years of dating and going through heartache and happiness? What have you learned about yourself, I suppose?
I would say I definitely learned that the earlier stage when I started dating, I think there must have been something there in my psyche that felt that I wasn't ready or didn't deserve to be in something very stable. I would never gravitate towards a very nice, normal person. I would always go for somebody
fun guy
that was a bit of a lunatic or just a bit dangerous or.
But we have that phrase, don't we? The bad guy. I always went for the bad. Like we even say that to ourselves and say it to our girlfriends, and that's just so awful, isn't it?
It is, but I think it's more from dating a lot and chatting to friends and observing their attachment styles, their habits. Not to regurgitate like psychology talk, but I think a lot of it for people sabotages safety. Knowing the end result before you go into something is a sense of familiarity and comfort. It can be to do with the way your relationships with growing up, your sense of self-worth. But for me, I genuinely think dating people who I was like, I think I already know that this isn't going to work out, but I know the ending. There's nothing there's nothing scary here in a way because I already know what's going to happen. And it's, as well, if you have a thing in your mind where you're like, I don't feel safe around men or I don't, you know what I mean? I think then dating somebody who you kind of deep down know is not the best person, they will probably do something, not very nice to you. It then sort of fulfills your idea of how men are all bad. I can't be with them. I think for me, dating the more kind of like my current relationship, when I started dating him, I had no idea if it was going to work out, where it was going. He was not the usual type. I was absolutely terrified, because I was like, what if we actually end up in a loving relationship? And then something doesn't go wrong. He doesn't cheat on me. He doesn't become abusive. He doesn't XYZ. He just maybe stops being in love with me, or it just doesn't work out. And I think for a lot of people, that is genuinely the most terrifying thing that could happen. You know what I mean? What if I'm just not enough and there's no reason for it? They're not a bad person. They didn't cheat. They didn't do XYZ. They're just, we just didn't work out. And that's that would invite a lot of self-reflection that I think people aren't able for,
If somebody is listening to this and has found out that their partner has been cheating for whatever reason or however they found out, what advice would you give them?
It's a tough one because every scenario is different. I think, well, first of all, make sure you have a really good support system around you. I was really lucky in the more recent experience where my family were really supportive, and I didn't really tell them about the first person. It was too complicated. And in that case, infidelity was more of a tool of abuse, whereas this one was very different. My friends, I had a network of people who I could talk to about it, people who I knew maybe I couldn't talk intimately about it, but just could distract me. Really just started to focus on what do I want going forward from my life, and like, why do I feel the need to be in a relationship, and focus on that person's life and fix that person. What do I really want to nurture in myself that I've been avoiding for all this time? Building up community around you. Like, I joined a few sports teams, tried to nurture hobbies, met new people. Meeting new people is such a good...
Scary as an adult, right?
It's terrifying. Really hard when, you're later on in your 20. Like, I think I was 29 and it's still young, but like, you'd be surprised. People get settled down and it's harder to meet people. But I have to say, meeting new people and opening up your view of the world and your perspective, shattering the perspective of like your life and how your life doesn't have to stay static. It can grow. It can go in any different directions. You have time to change things. Also, sometimes just take yourself on a trip away, go travel.
Love yourself.
Take yourself away from, the things that might remind you of them in that moment, and really, it's horrible, but sit with yourself. Hate to say it.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. And like you said, every situation is completely different. Do you think there's a possibility, can people get over that kind of betrayal in a relationship? Do you think that's possible out of people you've spoken to and your experience? Do you think it is possible? Let's say your last partner who cheated, if you did love them and it was just that insecurity or whatever, could you have gotten over that? Would there have been an opportunity for you to work at it, so to speak?
I think if it's with the right person and you have really built something that you thought is secure, you think is secure, if you both are really willing to do the work, I don't see a reason why you can't have a future. They have to show remorse though, or be...
Yeah, you've said that a few times. That's seems to be the... one of the most important things, if they show remorse for what they did.
Respect is the biggest thing. Remorse and respect, I suppose. Having the respect to be honest with you about it. Were they honest with you, or did you have to find out yourself? I think taking that emotional burden away from somebody, being able to tell them. It's interesting though, I know some relationships where they have literally said, what would we do? Say one person cheated, would you want to know? Would you want me to tell you? Like, really interesting conversations that are happening more now than they were maybe in the past. And I also think Ireland in particular has really rigid boundaries in terms of relationships and heteronormal relationships. And, I think every relationship can write their own rules. You shouldn't be afraid of outside judgment as well. Everyone's going to have an opinion, but like, they're not the people that have to live your life and live in that relationship. If there are kids involved, you have built a life together. Don't be so quick to throw them away, but maybe you might need a break or something. Maybe you need to change the dynamics of your relationship. I mean, I'm lucky that my breakups have never involved children or property or anything like that. I can't imagine the sheer level of stress. But also,
or pets. I'm getting the dog, by the way. If you cheat, I'm getting the dog. Also, yes, I love that. Write your own rules, and that is so important because every couple is completely different and in completely different circumstances. I do think it is one of those things that happens more often than we think, and is more common than we think.
Definitely.
And I think if you're going to take anything away from this conversation, is please don't be ashamed to talk about it, because communicating your feelings and talking will give you power and strength to move on, I suspect.
Yeah, and there's always time to build a new life for yourself. Like, don't stay just because of those reasons, kids, house, pets, because of the length of time you've been together. You're like, oh, we've been together 15 years. Can't throw that away. You can. Like, I hate to say it, but like, not to sound dumb to me, you know what I mean? But like, you can. If you are afraid to see what would happen if you're on your own, maybe you've lost yourself a bit too much as well. Maybe you need to figure out more about yourself and what you actually want. And maybe then if you would come back and be able to build something with that person, where you are more centered and you're the main character in your life, and there'd be more of a bedrock of respect there and new rules,
Okay, final question. I'm going to ask you this. From your experience and the people you've spoken to about being cheated on and all that kind of stuff, what would you say is the big red flag? that people should watch out for, or what is the big, okay, this cannot be good?
It's hard to say because both relationships I've had, there weren't really red flags in the second one. First one was like red flags. There was a circus.
Yeah.
But I think if they're a bit cagey about their phone, or, you know, there are maybe swathes of time where they're kind of uncontactable for no reason. If they act a bit distant, maybe. If they're a bit strange about their habits suddenly change. Obviously, there can be loads of reasons for those things, though. So I think a lot of it is about having clear and good communication in your relationship anyway, not just always being like, where were you? You know what I mean? And I would never go through somebody's phone, obviously. But I think that sense of caginess. But it's like if you're on TikTok and stuff, and like the amount of like, you know, armchair therapists on TikTok being like, this is the number one red flag. You can't go down those rabbit holes because it's unbelievably damaging to your mental health. But I think the main thing is your gut. Your gut is everything. You always know if something is wrong. It's not like all those kind of articles where it's like, if they suddenly don't want to sleep with you for 3 days, they are cheating, like all of this nonsense. It's just, if you know in yourself something is off, it might not necessarily be that they're cheating. Maybe they have feelings for somebody else, doesn't mean they've acted on it. Maybe they want to explore something that they've never, I don't know, maybe they're questioning certain things. I know my friends in relation, some friends I've spoken to who have changed the rules of their relationship, say if they're discovering more about their sexuality later in life, maybe they're bisexual, they never had a chance to explore these things. Anything can change. There can be any reason for somebody suddenly becoming distant, you know, but...
So check in.
Communication.
Check in. Communicate. Talk.
Yeah, and trust your gut. Rarely wrong.
Yeah.
Unless you're like really, really paranoid, then don't always trust your gut.
I suffer with IBS, so my gut is sometimes
Take your probiotics.
Listen, thank you so much for being with us today. What a great, in-depth and enlightening conversation.